welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and joining me via the magic of Skype, it's a man who knows a lot more about the USL than I do. His name is Phill Grooms. Phil, hello.
Hey, how's it going, Daryl? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I feel like I should apologise for not having you on sooner. I've genuinely been meaning to get you on at the end of the regular season, get you on as the playoffs are starting, get you on before the championship game, and now the USL season's over, so I guess it's a season review.
Well, I didn't want to keep asking you because I'm such a huge fan, and so I didn't want to be that huge fan that's like constantly bugging you to get on your show, but, it's an honor to be on. I'm really excited to talk about it.
All right, and let's lay out your credentials. You are one of the hosts of the USL Show.
That's right, and I've been covering St. Louis FC for about 4 years as well, so I've been nerding out for a little while now.
With the USL Show, I want to ask you this. I know there's quite a few of you that do it, but is it getting harder and harder to cover the league because there are just more and more teams? Like if I count correctly, between the East and the West, there were like 36 teams this year, right?
36 teams. It was rough, and it gets every year. We've had to really change the way we do things. Where I was really jealous. There's a League One, USL League One started this year, and there's a new podcast, and those guys, like, I listen to their show and they're like, listing off 3 or 4 players and like 5 or 6 play sequences of each game because they're only covering 5 games a week.
You're talking about League One fun, right?
Yeah, League One fun. Yeah, Ira Jersey's been on the show. I think you guys talked to Jason Weintraub too, and yeah, great guys. Love the show, and they get to delve deep into each game, and we're like over here just trying to list off the goals and assists move on. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's getting very hard, and we just kind of take a big, a big look from the outside these days rather than being too tactically involved on each game.
So it's worth letting our listeners know for this show that I'm really coming at the USL Championship from a place of semi-ignorance this year, especially because in years previous, I've known a fair bit about the Eastern Conference because the Richmond Kickers were in there. But now that the Kickers are in the aforementioned League One, I really haven't paid any good amount of attention to the Championship. So I'm hoping that if we've got listeners who are fans of Championship teams, they'll get something out of this show. But I'm also hoping that if you're just someone who hasn't paid attention, but like me is just sort of curious about the Championship because it's American soccer, I think this will be a good show for you because I'll be asking the questions of an ignorant person, and Phil will give the answers of an informed person. So it should be a good setup. So I guess my first question is, because I didn't get to see much of it, what was the standard like in 2019 in the USL Championship? Was it better than previously? How does it compare to Major League Soccer?
This year and last year, it got much better than the previous years. I remember when I first came in the league following St. Louis, I was, watching a lot of teams still kind of punting it and running, a lot of long balls. And at this point, we not only have a lot of teams trying to possess the ball or press, but they have working systems. They have triggers for presses. They have sequences of play, and each team plays a little bit different and has a little bit of a different MO. And so, there's still those teams out there that are doing, a little bit of the boring soccer, and that's how they win, and that's fine. But, we have a nice mix of, deliberate tactics, and it's really been more and more fun to watch every year as also the players improve. Unfortunately, after the loss of NASL, USL kind of filled that void there. So
that's what you attribute it to, is that the USL was able to absorb some of those NASL players?
That was a big step in improving the play. On top of better coaching, but yeah, a mix. I'd say 2/3 of it was that, yes.
So that's really interesting for me to hear, because I remember I watched a lot of the league in, say, like 2016 when we were covering the Kickers. We were doing play-by-play, and it did seem like the majority of teams had a 6'2" or larger striker, and a lot of the game plan was get it to that guy. So it's interesting to hear that tactically the league has moved on. What about in terms of comparing it to Major League Soccer? Like, how do you think there are a lot of players in USL could make the jump to MLS?
And I'd like to see them. This is a big thing I've been pushing, especially Ira Jersey really put it perfectly in one of his recent shows, that I think if they were given the chances that super draftees are given every year, and same price or less, you could get a veteran player who's been in the league for, professional soccer for 3 to 5 years and have them ready to go in MLS. Whereas we're getting all these super draftees straight out of college, which the college game is what it is right now. and they don't have that professional experience, and they need to be trained up a little more. Maybe there's a little more raw talent, but I think there's an argument to be made that the USL has ready-made pros for the MLS that only need a little bit of sharpening in order to be successful. And right now, they're not giving those players the chance by and large.
Any idea why? Do you have a theory as to why?
I think since we haven't seen a lot, I think the success rate has been a little lower than people would like for them to start really putting a lot of money into it. And so, Super Draft is just well established. It's always been a thing. USL is just now starting to get its feet under it being a really legit league. And so, we've got guys like Dane Kelly who killed it in the USL, but didn't do too much of anything with DC United last year.
Right.
There's a few other players sprinkled around, but only a few successful ones. And so I think we just need to see guys taking chances on a larger scale so we could get better optics on, what is the percentage of successful players coming out of the USL. And so I think it'll take some time for that to really take hold.
Can we name some successful players? Like the only one that comes to mind easily for me is, I think, Mark Anthony Kaye, right? Who is now with LAFC, was originally in the USL.
The poster child for, what we're trying to do for sure. But look at the system he went into on top of that. And also, as a counter argument, Dane Kelly went into DC United before they really started doing well this year. And that was a bad system for him. And so there is a little bit of that. But Sebastian Ibeaga is another good one. He's been the third center back for NYC FC for a couple of years. One of the best center backs in the league when he played for San Antonio FC about 3 years ago. So he's one. But Enzo Martinez from Charlotte is a Uruguayan player that.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, one of the assist leaders. I'm sure, every time he came to St. Louis, I'd be quivering in my boots because the guy is just a smart player. He knows how to pick out a pass. A good assister who could score at any place on the field as well. So, he didn't do too well with the Rapids. But again, it was the Rapids. So, and they were playing him as an 8, not as a 10. A lot of arguments out there. But those are a couple of the situations we're looking at in the recent past.
I remember that transfer, Martinez going from Charlotte to the Rapids. And I contacted both teams and just asked if there was a fee or anything, and the response I got from both was just the terms were undisclosed, which made me think that there maybe wasn't a fee or there wasn't like a proper market mechanism. And it feels to me that that's what's missing, right? There's very little of this MLS team is going to bid $250,000 for this player who's impressing in the USL. That market just isn't there for some reason.
That it's really without MLS actually coming after players aggressively and not wanting to pay for players. And the other side to that from a USL perspective is no player wants to sign more than a 1 or 2 year contract. Almost everyone's on a 1 year with an option year after that.
I see.
In order to, if they do too well, they don't want to be stuck with these USL clubs. And so, it goes both ways. And an MLS team may not take a chance on a player if they have to purchase them. So that's part of the problem is these. And it's something that the USLPA, which is the Players Association, is ramping up their first year. They're starting their talks right now with the USL. That could affect it as well. But again, I think it's just going to take MLS taking chances with actual money for that to change.
Oh, let's talk about the USLPA because there's going to be a CBA, I think, for the first time. Is that right? Does that pose any threat to the league? Because I know that some players conditions aren't always great in the USL, right? So I wonder if the players make some demands and the owners can't meet. Is there any chance we see USL be a little unstable next year because of the upcoming CBA?
I really think they're working together with the CBA because they realize how important it is to their stability to maintain happiness in their players. I think that's something I went to business school and some of my best professors talked about making sure your employees are so happy that they don't even care to unionize, that doesn't become a problem. And so, the USL is seeing, they got to keep their players happy. All these large expansion fees, it's up to about $10 million in the USL even. And the players need to get a share of that. You know what I mean? They can't be left behind. And we heard some news coming from Nipun Chopra this year about Hartford started up this year. They really rode the line on how they could treat players legally according to the league rules and how they couldn't. And the players in a lot of cases have to kind of go along with things because it's their livelihood. And so, the CBA is going to come out and it could cause problems in that it's going to cost more, right, to get a player. We can't just have these large rosters on every team. We're going to have to really take care of them, and it's going to be hard to have the good stability of the league. I think you nailed it there. But it is important, and I think the USL has been smart enough to kind of figure it out this far, and I think they'll find their middle ground on how to keep going forward with that.
Well, I'm now intrigued about Hartford. What type of thing were they doing that rode the line?
Okay, so they were not giving them a per diem for food, apparently. I hope, I can't remember what Nipun actually said in his article and what I've heard, so don't take all of this for absolute truth.
Okay.
But, little things like that. They would not give them per diems, or they forced them to play an extra exhibition game at the end of the year after the season was over. Little things like MRIs were pushed back. We don't know whether that was the team or whether it was the doctor, but it was very clear that Hartford players were all very upset. And the coach, I'm blanking on his name, Jimmy Nielsen, was their coach this year, and even he left the team on a 3-year contract. We're not sure which way that went, but things are bad there, and it became very apparent that a lot of the things Nipun was publishing were definitely true because of what happened after.
Got it. Okay, let's focus on what happened this season then. The big story that obviously caught my eye and caught a lot of people's eyes was the Phoenix Rising story. They went on I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a 20-game winning streak. And they finished, 18 points ahead of the second-place team in the West. How did Phoenix Rising not win USL Cup? Because the eventual champions were the Real Monarchs instead.
Most people had them winning the whole league, even on top of Louisville, who went on a good run, and all the best teams in the East who have loaded rosters. Phoenix had a loaded roster, but they were just doing so well. They're so well put together. They're so well coached. But after that 20-game streak, they got beat by the Monarchs shortly after, who were the eventual champions. And some little signs of wear and tear were showing up, that perhaps even defenses were starting to figure out how to play Phoenix to a certain extent. But I lean on a lot of it being tired legs, some injuries perhaps we didn't all know about. And, if you read up on what Joe Lowry talks about from The Athletic, Joe and Cleats, Rising Tactics on Twitter, he kind of kept us abreast of that. And I think they just, they peaked a little too soon, unfortunately, which is huge in an American playoff system, right?
Of course. It's all about that, right? What about the eventual champions then, the Real Monarchs? Are they worthy champions? I know that's always sort of a loaded question because it implies a lack of faith in the playoff system. But I'm like, are they worthy champions, and how did they do it? Like, what were the strengths of the Real Monarchs down the season?
Always have a well-built roster, and they tend to kind of pick a lot of the best players, maybe not the actual best who you have to pay a ton of money for, but guys who are productive on smaller teams like Charleston Battery. They stole 2 of their best players a couple years ago, and they're continuing to produce for them. So anyway, they build a really good roster with really good build of players that are affordable and little splashes of guys who are really incredibly good. And they play an open attacking style. And this year, Olave. I wrote down his name, Jameson Olave. I always mess up his first name.
Former player, right? Former RSL player.
Exactly, former center back for them. He became their coach at some point this year, and he started implementing this 3-back system with, it just happened to be the three great center backs who can play. The 2 on the outside had the mobility and the speed to do that, and also be a 1v1 shutdown center back. And it just worked. They were able to hold people off. They were able to send numbers forward and have an open style. And then in the final, they kind of adjusted a little bit to take on an Eastern team, because the 2 conferences do play quite different in most cases.
Ooh, what's the difference?
So it's commonly believed and argued that the East plays a more compact defensive style. They're more likely to press the heck out of you, depending on the team. And then the West is very open. They'll sit back, they'll try to counter, and you have room to move and room to breathe and room to pass if you do want to. So that's kind of the way, and I find that to be true for the most part myself.
Oh, that's fascinating to me, but I suppose it makes sense, because even though they eventually meet in the playoffs, it really is 2 different leagues for the majority of the season, right? Is it home and away against everybody in your conference and no inter-conference play?
Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah. So you really do have 2 completely different styles developing. That's interesting. It seems to mirror maybe more like what has happened in the rest of American sports.
Very much so. Yeah, I bet you could do some comparisons with basketball and hockey and all of that. It's, very much so.
So I've got another question about Real Monarchs. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. They are the sort of MLS 2 team to Real Salt Lake.
Oh, you're totally right. And there are different kinds of 2 teams throughout the league. And there are the 2 teams that just play basically their best DA players with a couple of 20-year-olds, more or less.
Yeah.
And then there's the New York Red Bulls 2, who really use their 2 side, and they bring a lot of those players up to the senior team quite often. They rotate through. So you get a mix of a lot of DA players, but also some veterans that, really deserve to play in MLS on a regular basis. The Monarchs, at some point, Real Salt Lake built them their own area, their own training facilities, and it's right next to the academy, and they have their own, soccer-specific stadium that can house, I think, 5,000 people or so, and they have a decent attendance, or almost 2,000 on average, and so they have their own thing, and so it's a mix of, they don't just not care about attendance. They actually market games. They have their own name. They have their own place to play that's not oversized. And they don't just throw out DA players. They only have a few, actually. A lot of times they'll bring in a lot of veterans and a lot of the younger 20s. But, a mix of having the younger players from the DA, but also a lot of players who can make the move up to the senior team, which about 3 to 5 have done that. And we're looking at David Ochoa as a player who could, take the goalkeeper crown for the foreseeable future on that team.
Oh, because Nick Romando just retired, obviously, yeah.
Exactly.
Do you feel like that's the correct way to do it, the way that Real Monarchs have done it, to sort of have it as an independent team with opportunities for young players, but not to go all in on young players like, say, Tacoma Defiance did?
You're going to hear one opinion from me, and I'm going to try to let you know what everyone feels. This is one of the biggest debates in the USL right now is, some of these people have, let's say, Sporting Kansas City's 2 team or Atlanta United's 2 team, almost these games. And it's just in a giant stadium for Swope Park. And all they are is throwing out a DA team. And it's just, as an independent fan of an independent USL side, that is so hard to watch.
Yeah.
And to see these guys mostly get creamed by veteran adults in the USL just for the sake of developing those teams. And so as an independent fan, it's hard for me to see that. I like the mix. I appreciate what the Real Monarchs have done. I think they're the best example of a little bit of everything for a 2-side. Tacoma Defiance pretty much throws out all the kids, but they also play in a baseball stadium in a different city. They have a 2,000 average attendance, so that's a nice mix in that way. But it's still hard to watch those games, and every once in a while they'll do that thing where they bring down like 4 or 6 MLS senior team players to get the minutes and, cream the other team in that case. So, I think it's just one of those, you guys are really good on your podcast about having a gray area of argument, and there's no one truth here. There's no one good way to do it. But I know there are a few doing it badly, in my opinion. And I'd really like to see those ones that really don't seem to care about the USL except for the level of play either spend the money to improve the situation or go on down to USL League One is a big argument of mine.
Yeah, so that's been suggested, or it's been rumoured that the USL would like some of those MLS 2 teams to drop down to USL League One, right? And sort of do what North Texas SC did, the FC Dallas affiliate, and just, play your kids, but play them in the 3rd tier instead of in the 2nd tier. Do you see that as a good, it sounds like you do, see that as a good solution where maybe a team like Tacoma Defiance is better off in League One?
I think so. And I don't think I think people were a little surprised that the level wasn't that bad. North Texas had several players that went straight from League One all the way to FC Dallas and did just fine. I won't say they were incredible, but, Edwin Surreal, I think, got some time with North Texas. What's the striker's name? Really?
Ricardo Pepi?
Thank you, Ricardo Pepi. I'm really bad with names if you haven't been able to tell. So I
remember because every time he played Richmond, he scored goals.
Yeah, right. He was really good for them, and he got some time with Dallas, and I think he performed fine for the situation he's in. So I think we're seeing that if they're able to prove that is the case, that a 2-team in League One can prep you for MLS, or you even can do a legitimate loan like the rest of the world does in tier 2, say like the English EFL Championship. Those guys don't have guys that come in and out at will. They have guys that are loaned up there for at least 3 months. Something like that would be nice for the championship, in my opinion, to make them more of a legit league around the world, to be more comparable, which is their goal, to be one of the best 2 second-tier leagues in the world. You can't do that with a 2-side happening. So they kind of got to, figure things out, figure out what they want to be in order for that to work out in the future. And basically they've drawn a line where we expect a 5,000 person stadium, and I think they're going to start raising the ante on what they expect, and the 2 teams will just decide whether they want the level of play or they want to spend the money and just go from there. I'm not sure we'll see, at least from the league yet, them saying all 2 teams are gone or here, and so we'll see how that pans out.
Okay, so maybe it won't be like a big diktat comes down. It'll be like maybe just a bit of pressure here and there, and maybe a raising of some minimum standards that you either, like you said, choose to meet or drop down.
Yeah, that's what I foresee, and I hope that's kind of the way it's handled. There's rumors that MLS may say, listen, buddy, it's all or nothing. So I don't know if that's true, but they could do that, so we'll see.
Well, actually, I'd love to talk about the relationship between MLS and USL, because it seems like it's somewhat cooperative in a way that obviously relationships between leagues in the past have not been. And I wonder how cooperative is it, like in reality? Because from the outside it looks like they're all working well together. So how cooperative is it, and how competitive is it between the 2 leagues?
From the outside it looks like they're working together. I agree with you, but I would say Twitter disagrees with you very much so. You get these little situations where people really read into what's happening or what could be the case, and it's just these rumors just inflame and get out of control. And even I start to buy into some of them, and I try to reach out to the league to kind of clear them up. I feel like that's one of the best things I can do for the league is kind of clear up rumors. But, someone in a really good position, trustworthy, and someone I can trust, told me that it's like 2 brothers. They don't have the same aim, but they are basically working together. They're a family, and they fight, and they may not agree on every single thing, but for the most part, they're working together toward one goal, which is, having a really good American soccer pyramid. And so, there's give and take. And so we'll see in December, it's rumored that the USL MLS deal is up for renegotiation. So we'll see if anything comes up next month. That's next month. And, go from there. But I foresee them working together for another 3 years or so, at least, at worst. I cannot see them cutting ties completely.
And it seems to me that it's almost like what you think of as a regular pyramid, like you would see in European nations, where MLS is the top division, USL Championship is the second division, USL League 1 is the third division. But there's no ProRel. There's just, but you can like spend some time in USL Championship. It's almost like you establish your business bona fides and you get quote unquote promoted to Major League Soccer by proving yourself down there. Is that that's sort of the system we've ended up with, right?
I mean, you might as well just call it, ProRel via capitalism, Yeah. And so, and I could even see if ProRel doesn't happen in the USL, it is rumored that it will happen between the 2 leagues within its own league structure. It could happen, but I think if it doesn't, then you'll see the same thing. You'll see some teams be successful over and over and over and have a good business plan, just bounce right up to championship based on money alone. So we'll see.
Would you? I don't know your feelings about ProRel, but would you be happy with that as a situation if it brought stability and opportunity, even though it's not proper ProRel?
You mean the capitalistic version of it?
Yeah, if that really became the system where that just kept happening between League 1 and the Championship and between the Championship and MLS.
I mean, if they deserve it and they're willing to put the money forward, then yes, they deserve to be up. A lot of this league, there's some teams that can pull their weight because they have more money and some that barely get by because they can't. It's just going to be more exciting if there's more capital to be spent and better players and better facilities. It's just going to be good for the league. And furthermore, for the pyramid, you may need to send some teams that can't afford it down so that they can be successful in a lower level. I think it's an okay way to do it if you have no other choice, and I foresee that happening in the future if it continues to have no other choice.
Fair enough. Today's Total Soccer Show is sponsored by Policy Genius. To properly provide for their families, most people need 10 times the life insurance coverage than they get through their jobs, which means that your employer life insurance is leaving you underinsured. That's probably true if you're a USL player, but it's where Policy Genius can help both USL players and you, listener. Policy Genius is the easiest way to shop for a life insurance plan that's not tied to your job. In minutes, you can compare quotes from top insurers to find your best price. And once you apply, the Policy Genius team will handle all the paperwork and red tape. And then the good news is the life insurance you buy through Policy Genius stays with you even if you leave your job. Like, say you get an offer from the Premier League. Policy Genius doesn't just make it easy to get life insurance. They can also help you find the right home and auto insurance and disability insurance too. So when you're looking at your workplace benefits this month, make sure to double check your life insurance options. Then go to policygenius.com to get quotes and apply in minutes. Policy Genius, the easy way to compare and buy life insurance. Let's get into some players. I think I emailed you before we recorded this to have a think about maybe 3 players who've really impressed in the USL Championship, East or West, and sort of what they've done to impress. So would you mind running me through the 3 players I've hope you've selected?
Thank goodness I did some research. Joe Greenspan is my favorite center back in the USL, and he's 6'6". He's a big boy. He plays for the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, which is famously in this league at least, led by Bob Lilly, who is the defensive powerhouse of the last 10, 20 years. I forget how long he's been in the league, but the guy has a lot of championships with not Rockford. Anyway, with his former team. And Joe Greenspan is just like the big center back that's going to destroy everyone. He also has the smarts. He's really good at stepping and being in the right place at the right time. Obviously, he's very good at putting in goals with his head as well. So he's my favorite center back. He started out with the Rapids. He's a Navy graduate, and he did have to serve a year with the Navy. So
I remember this. There was a thing where they drafted him and then lost him essentially to the Navy, right?
Yeah, after about a year of him kind of being able to work it out for a season, he left for a year, eventually was traded to Minnesota United, and then went to the USL, where he's been dominating ever since. So I hope he gets up another chance in MLS in the next year or two. He's 27, so there's a chance of it.
Okay, you got a couple more players for me?
Yes, the next one is Canard Forbes, who's 31, but this year he also plays for the Riverhounds. Man, I didn't realize I chose 2 Riverhounds here, but he has
they finished
5
top
goals,
of the East, right?
9. Yeah, they were. I think they won the Eastern Conference title there. But Canard Forbes, 5 goals, 9 assists, 83% completion rate. But he's not just known for his passing ability and keeping the ball moving. The guy can get stuck in. He's really good. Jamaican. So he's very athletic on top of all of those things. So just a really good player. You can really tell when he's in the game and when he's not. I think he subbed in at half in one game, and it was just a total turnaround for the team. So he's one of my favorites and very appreciated in most cases until this year. I've heard Bob Lilly does everything he can to keep that guy on his team for very clear reasons, I think. So.
And sorry, remind me, what position does he play?
Defensive midfield.
Okay, defensive midfield. All right, so we got one more. Is it another Pittsburgh player?
It is not, thank goodness. It is the man that is pretty much held responsible for making Phoenix as good as they are. Salomon Asante is a Ghanaian right winger. Joe Greenspan is 6'6" and 27 years old. Salomon Asante is 5'2" and 29 years old. Yeah, he's a little guy. That might even be thinking a little bit positively there with his height, but
that's what he puts on Tinder.
Yeah, exactly. 22 goals, 17 assists. This guy killed it this year, and he killed it last year. He won league MVP for all the right reasons. He's one of the guys that was slowing down at the end of the season. I'm not sure he scored a goal in the final 4 to 5 games. So that was a big reason I think they slowed down a bit. But the guy's just super athletic. You can't get the ball off him. At 5'2", he's learned how to the mix of being physical in a league like the USL, but also he's an expert diver. So. So he's figured it out, and the guy can score goals from anywhere. He's amazing. Really good player, probably the best in the league.
So when I'm picturing an Asante goal, am I picturing him almost like I know this is a very extreme comparison, but like a Mohamed Salah coming in from the right wing, like dribbling in at goal from an angle, or is it something else? It is that.
No, that's exactly it. And it is usually on a counterattack because he's got his speed. He can dribble at you, but mostly he's on the move. And maybe even like a Pulisic, if he's on the move and he's kind of shifty, he's able to kind of get around or get just enough space to get a goal on frame, even if it's outside the box. It's just ridiculous, the kind of things he's able to do. And it just, by way of having him up there, it makes every other attacker on that team get open at that point. And those guys do capitalize for sure. Adam John and Junior Flemings, two guys that were very productive this year for Phoenix. And part of it was that.
What about youngsters? Was there any youngsters in the league? And really guys that I'm thinking are probably thinking, okay, I'm young, I'm performing in the USL Championship, I maybe have a shot at going to the next level and still having a really maybe big career in MLS. Is there anyone who fits that profile?
And it's less, honestly, than a couple of years ago when Real Salt Lake had Ledesma and Mendez was coming with Los Dos. So it is less guys. Back in those 2 years ago, there were tons of them. And I think MLS and foreign leagues have caught on, and they're all leaving the USL before they really get a lot of time. But the obvious one we talked about already, David Ochoa, 18-year-old goalkeeper. In goal, he did really well in the final with the Monarchs. He's just going to be solid. He's going to move up. I hope he gets his chance at MLS next year, even part-time, if not full-time. And the guy's just been really solid. You've been able – you guys watch him closely with the U20s. And I think he got first looks with the U17s. And he's just taken over for obvious reasons. He does really well with the national team too.
What about on the coaching front? Is there anyone that sort of made a name for themselves? I guess Bob Lilly had already got a name for himself, but are there any up and coming coaches who are making their reputation in the championship?
Yeah, Matt Doyle always mentions Ian Russell, the coach of Reno, 1865. Pardon me. I like him as well. He's always had a really attacking team, and he likes to put players around the entire field that can score goals in different ways. And he plays very open, and they're fun to watch. They can be a little streaky because of how open they are, but he has really good teams year after year after year. And so he's one that could move up. They are part of the earthquake system. So Ian Russell, maybe he'll get a chance if we ever do lose. We do not want to lose him, but if the earthquake position ever becomes open. But the other one is Hackworth at Louisville City. Hackworth, if you break down what happened in the playoffs with Louisville City moving up to get to that final game, Hackworth really moved some chess pieces and would really make some crazy moves to the point where they were down to Indy 11 in the Eastern Conference Final. And he just started pulling a center back and started throwing in attackers. And I thought, oh, gosh, this is going to get ugly. He's thrown in the kitchen sink, and there's just going to be a couple counterattacks, and this game's over. Well, that's the game that they came back from a 1-0 loss to winning 3-1 in the end. And it was after he made all those moves. And, yeah, he threw a lot of attackers in there, but that is just a team that he's created that can rotate like crazy. And even though there's a center back on, there's always someone covering in case of a turnover. And just what he was able to do with that team, a team that was already good but had some faults when he took over for O'Connor, who went over to Orlando City. He's just really, I'm impressed with what he's done, and I think he should get a chance up top. Rick Shantz is the Phoenix Rising coach, who was able to take, an all-star team more or less for the USL and coach them up really well. I think they became better than the sum of their parts, even as good as they were. So Rick Shantz is another shout.
So the most famous name, at least to me, going into it, I recognise Hackworth's name because he was the U17 coach, right, from that Andrew Carlton U17 team. But the most famous coach in all of the USL Championship has to be Eric Wynalda at the Las Vegas Lights, right? I noticed they finished bottom half of the table in the West. So I think it was his first full season as a coach, or his first season as a coach with Las Vegas. What did we learn about Eric Wynalda, the coach, this year, if anything?
Not much, to be honest. I think they were very similar to previous coaches. And, Vegas is just like a carnival. They're in it to really put on a show. They do really crazy things. They did they dropped $1,000 or something from a helicopter during halftime and just let it, they just put on a show, and it's a really good show. Their supporter groups are really amazing. I've gone to a game out there, and now where they play, Cashman Field, is now soccer specific. It used to be a baseball field, but now it's soccer specific. So they're doing amazing things out there. But the soccer on field has never really picked up. They've become a really inconsistent side, or they have been the entire time. Very attacking, very glitzy in different positions, but they never seem to play as a team. I think they were a little better this year in that way, and he was able to pull a lot of guys from like the Cal United system, from out in his days playing in the amateur soccer leagues or coaching the amateur soccer leagues. So some really interesting players came in, were really talented, did well for him, and they improved their team quality. But for the most part, they weren't much to look at. I think Wynalda was also kind of fun because, he's got a mouth on Twitter. So he said some interesting things here as well.
So are you kind of giving him a pass in terms of like tactical coaching ability, because it seems to be there's some sort of demand that Las Vegas just plays a crazy attacking style of soccer? Or was that Wynalda's choice, or was that sort of more of a club identity that we just have to do? Like it goes with the dropping $1,000 from a helicopter?
It's a mix. I think perhaps, their owner's very interesting. He's an interesting guy, and he's the one driving the craziness, the crazy carnival stuff. But I do think he expects, open, fun to watch soccer. And like I said, I do think Wynalda brought a little balance to that, just a little bit. But I'm with you. I'm not sure. I'm asking the same question. I'm not sure where it starts and where it ends on who wants what. But I do know Vegas has been about the same every year, not quite. And flashes of brilliance and fun, but can't defend out a lot of games and things like that. So
they could put together a nice highlight reel of the season, maybe, if they needed to.
Goalkeeper that took the ball out of the box and counterattacked all the way to half field, so that was fun to watch.
All right, I'll look for that. I'd like to see that. Were there any teams that sort of didn't finish necessarily like near the top of the table, but maybe overperformed expectations? Are there any sort of, anyone punching above their perceived weight?
I think Austin Bold surprised me because they brought in, by far, they were the oldest average age team in the USL, but they brought in a lot of experienced guys from MLS, former MLS players, I think even a Liga MX player or two. And, they did what kind of you think old men might be able to do, which sometimes they got outrun. And a lot of times they kind of had a low block situation. But
how old are we talking? Like 50?
All right. I mean, I'm 36, so they're probably all around my age or younger.
Oh, I see. All right, yeah, but towards the end of a professional career.
Yeah, very much so. And there were multiple players in their 30s. So, but they have the wisdom. A lot of old guys, they figure out how to not have to run as much. Yeah. And yet they're still in the right place. I think on your show even, they talked about what's the difference between a German-style roster build versus an American. And in Germany, a lot of those lower divisions, they'll bring in the big, slow guys that are really smart, whereas we will often default to the athletic freak who can't. His terrible touch, he can't hold the ball at his feet. But anyway, I think Austin Bold overperformed to what I expected, and it was fun to watch that.
All right, so going forward to 2020, what sort of changes do we expect in the USL Championship? Like, do you expect some of those MLS2 teams to drop down? Are there any teams? I think there were a couple of teams leaving to join MLS, right, or at least one. And are there any expansion teams coming in for 2020?
Oh shoot! I was in the middle of researching my 2020 expansion teams. I believe Omaha is coming in next year. And so that'll be a really, we need to really play up some of these Midwestern towns that have really good soccer potential.
Yeah.
Omaha is one of the poster child for that for sure. But 2020, I think, to work toward that ProRel hope that USL keeps kind of touting. They even touted it during the halftime of the final with the league president, Jake Edwards. As soon as next year, they're going to start in 2020, they're going to start an interleague tournament. And so it'll be kind of like the Open Cup, but it's all USL League One and all USL Championship teams. And it's to kind of test the level of play between the two leagues to make sure there's not a giant gap. And so, if that goes well, if they find that, some of the best League One teams are beating some of the worst championship teams, that ProRel thing might be more and more viable, and they might be able to use that to decide, well, how many can do it? Are we talking one gets relegated each year and promoted, or are we talking three? Is the level even closer than we think? So It's just going to be one of those things. After a few years of that's something to watch. That we want that competition to be tough. We want it to be surprising how many League One teams do well if we want ProRel in the near future, and that could happen next year as well. But it's not next year, but Queensboro FC is going to be headed by David Villa as an owner in 2021.
All right.
And Diego Loyal were also announced. Landon Donovan is an owner and coach of that team, maybe even GM, which worries me. I haven't figured out the details there, but they'll be coming in, and there's a lot of really cool teams coming in the future. Even Des Moines Menace are going to put a team finally into USL Championship.
You mentioned to me off air something about USL Academies. Now, as I understand it, this is different to the US Soccer Development Academies that a lot of MLS teams have. Can you explain the USL Academy situation to me?
Well, I think in a lot of cases, the USL is looking to use those young players. I think they see potential in the sale of young players off to, if not MLS, if MLS doesn't want to buy in, we've seen that Europe has interest already. And so they're trying to kind of encourage USL teams as they become more and more successful and have, stability, that they start an academy if they haven't already, and really start pushing young players into their rosters and building them up, which is just going to help the United States system in general. And so I think it's all of these things combined. They finally started a tournament this year. It started with under 17 USL teams on all levels, all the way down to League Two, which used to be the PDL. Participated in this, and so they've done the first phase. My team, St. Louis FC, did really well, and they're going to move on to the next phase. But next year, I think they're going to add in U15s, and eventually the goal is to start an academy league that be not the DA. It'll be USL's Academy League, kind of like the DA, but not the DA. So I don't know exactly what that will look like. And, I don't know if this has anything to do with this is one of those rumors, like, do MLS and USL hate each other? Are they trying to take each other out? MLS has rumored to have their own academy league. They just restructured the DA that seemed to favor MLS academies more.
It sure did.
Yeah. So if this wasn't a direct counter to all of those things, it sure is good timing for the USL to really take care of their clubs and their future players, and even future revenue. That's the kind of goal there.
So is there anything about the USL, the Championship or League One that I haven't asked you about that you feel like is a big USL topic? Because I think I'm in that sort of that Donald Rumsfeld situation of I don't know what I don't know.
You've really hit the good ones. I said you had really good questions in our email, and you hit almost all of them. I think we've touched on it. The last thing I want to talk about is I think my favorite interview from a USL perspective in a podcast this year was when Adam Bells at Scuffed interviewed the GM for OC, Orange County SC. His name's Oliver or something. I'm so sorry I forgot the name, but please do look up that interview, because this guy has great vision for his club and how to use young players coming up in their system. They have a 16-year-old goalkeeper that started lots of games this year named Cervantes that's been playing also with the U17s, I believe. And their goal is not, the problem we talked about earlier with MLS teams not willing to spend the money. We don't want to do what MLS has done in the past, where we can't send a player off to Europe because the money they're offering us isn't worth the league losing that big name, right? That's a thing in MLS. The USL doesn't want to fall into that trap. And Oliver had this really good idea, and I think MLS teams are even starting to do this, where they don't put a hindering number on Cervantes. Let's say MLS or a Scandinavian club wants to buy this player at a young age. They're just going to put, a percentage fee for the next sell-on, a sell-on clause that's a little bit higher than you would expect. So, this Scandinavian club may get a really good goalkeeper that's really good by the time he's 20 or 22, and then they may sell him on for, let's say, $10 million. Well, 20% of $10 million is a heck of a lot of money for a USL club.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly work it out, but yeah, it's a lot.
Right. $200,000. That's just or $2 million rather. So these guys are looking forward. If they do that year after year, or they do it every other year with a player, and they're able to make money and have this pipeline of cash, that does a lot for a USL club. And so I love that aim. I love that idea of how to move forward with young players when there isn't a solidarity payment system. USL teams are having to get creative, and I hope my team looks into that. I hope even MLS teams look into that. So
you've given a plug to Scuffed. People are listening to the Total Soccer Show. We can't let you go without plugging the USL Show. I was looking at the feed last night. You hadn't yet published the Championship game review. I'm assuming that pod is coming soon.
Friday, which is tomorrow night. So yeah, that'll come out over the weekend. So it'll be in your podcast apps over the weekend, and I'm sure you'll listen to it Monday morning on the way to work or something. But yeah, and we're part of the Beautiful Game Network, which is really just a network full of USL podcasts. And so if you just look up the Beautiful Game Network at bgm.fm, that's a really good place to start if you want to start learning about a team in your area, maybe closer than your MLS side. You ought to go to a game, because more often than not, the game day thrills are so good. It's really interesting. You have access. You talk to players. You shake their hands. It's just it's a different feel, and it's really fun. The access is just incredible, and the level of play is getting better and better every year.
And then, in terms of the USL Show, do you guys take some time off for the off season?
Yes.
Sounds like you're partly looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. But we have a lot of plans for the off season, and I kind of head a lot of those up. And I think a lot of our other guys are going to head up a lot of interviews. Michael Chang is going to get interviewed. David Ochoa is being interviewed in the near future. And so, we're going to have a lot of those interviews coming up with a lot of players and coaches and GMs. And a lot of those end up being a little bit more interesting than some of our fun podcasts on the weekly basis.
All right. And I think I want to try and make a promise to our listeners and to you that we'll do a better job of checking in on the USL Championship next season. Hopefully, Phil, we can get you back like sometime in 2020. We can get a feel for the league before it's over next season. Until then, I'll say thank you, Phil, for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you, Daryl, so much. Appreciate the time.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and Total Soccer Show will be back tomorrow with another episode.